One of the best scenes in horror cinema is a single shot of a girl in her room. This is Mima, a Japanese pop idol who just announced she's retiring. That same night, she receives an anonymous fax with one word printed over and over.
Traitor.
It's the first instance where the boundary separating Mima's public image and personal space is violated. As an angry fan has now made it clear, they know where she lives, and they're not happy about her decision. She looks out the window, and the camera swiftly zooms out as Mima's room becomes tinier and tinier. The contrast between her small, lit room to the surrounding hyper-realistic apartments mimics this nearly cosmic sense of being watched. And what's frightening is the fact that Mima doesn't know who's watching her. She stares out the window, at the unknown, and at us, the viewer. The idea of someone constantly perceiving you is unsettling. When your body becomes a commodity, and objectification is the appeal, what effect will it have on your mind? How do you define your identity if, at any moment, you could act in a way that tarnishes the image others have of you? This dilemma is at the heart of Satoshi Kon's 1997 film, Perfect Blue. The movie is known for its trippy third act, one that makes you watch a woman go insane when her identity shatters under the weight of its own contradictions. Just as a viewer cannot distinguish between what is actually happening and what is Mima's delusion, Mima can't distinguish between what parts of her self-perception are real or fabricated. This is a film that forces your view of reality to devolve alongside its narrative. And it's just as disorienting an experience as a woman's perception of herself in the real world. What started off as a term that stated how women are usually reduced to sexual appeal has now been completely watered down to random comparisons and just weirdly incorrect examples. So instead, let's strip down the concept of the gaze. Your understanding of your existence and place within society is identity. This identity will constantly shift through outside influences, like ideology, social interactions, and personal experiences. When we look at someone, their appearance can give us some idea of what their identity is. But that thought already has a fallacy built into it, one based on a subtle power difference. We, the gazer, have all the power to perceive you in any way we think is right. I can assume you're a good, modest woman because you're not showing skin like all females do these days. I can assume you must really love your pretty pale skin, and that's why you're dressing modestly because you don't want to get darker. I can assume whatever I want based on my own preconceived beliefs. And when I do this, I reduce you to a concept. I don't know who you are. The gazer has the power to perceive, and the person being gazed at remains an object. Mima's entire career is defined by gaze. Her image is a commodity that is carefully manufactured by an agency and sold to an audience. The film opens with Mima's final performance with the group Cham, where she announces she's going to become a full-time actress. Later, Mima is sitting in between her managers, Tadokoro and Rumi, as they argue about her career. Mima's been offered a role in a drama series, but she only has a single line. When it comes time for her scene, she becomes self-conscious as she watches employees on set laugh at her. When Tadokoro suggests giving Mima more lines, the producer is skeptical, saying that pop idols are hard to use, most likely referring to how Mima already has an established image in the public eye. Tadokoro explains to Rumi that if Mima wants to become a real actress, she has to prove herself. But there is a solution offered by the producer. Mima can get more screen time if she agrees to take part in a rape scene. To understand what this offer symbolizes, we need to delve into why there's such a tension between the identity of a pop idol and an actress. And why would this suggested scene destroy Mima's old public persona for good? Hiroshi Aoyagi, a Japanese anthropologist, publishes extensive research about the idol industry. In his book, Islands of 8 Million Smiles, he discusses what's essential to crafting and maintaining the idol personality. In a cultural sense, Pop idols serve as the model for what an appropriate female adolescent is. Through their roles as singers, fashion models, and media celebrities, idols promote the commercialization of the coming-of-age aesthetic. Their performances invite young girls to replicate fashionable trends and behaviors, shaping youth culture in alignment with market interests. Like all businesses, the idol industry has a goal of maximizing profit by attracting and appealing to loyal fans. If idols are manufactured as examples of proper femininity in Japan, then what image do predominantly male, middle-aged producers deem acceptable and profitable? Good wife, wise mother is a saying that describes a type of traditional womanhood that's beneficial for East Asian society. Numerous pop idols embody a meek, submissive, and kind portrayal of femininity, befitting a young girl who will grow up into a proper wife and mother. Compared to Western celebrities who are rewarded for having bold or unique personalities, Japanese pop idols fit into similar boxes. Usually, the ideal idol is virginal, friendly, and most importantly, unthreatening. As Hiroshi states, Japanese pop idols typically depict images that are fairly standard, appearance, ability, and charm that are above average, but not so much as to alienate or offend the audience. The word alienate is important because it implies there's this connection between the audience and performer that needs to be maintained. This thin line of fabricated ordinariness is necessary for another major selling point of the idol sphere: escapism. Idols personify an adolescent bubble, where girls always remain playful, carefree, and still uncorrupted by adult life. Adults in Japanese society are under extreme pressure from toxic workplace culture to rigid social norms. Meanwhile, J-pop songs often explore simple themes associated with teenagehood, like friendship or romance. Combined with Idol's cutesy brand, a fantasy of youthful innocence is the product being sold. This is partly why idol fan bases are largely dominated by middle-aged men. For many, the performance of childish simplicity both on and off stage brings back fond memories of their youth. The industry thrives on this nearly obsessive, unwavering support men have for their female idols. When femininity is the product being packaged and sold by men for men, it creates this oddly parasocial situation where male fans can vicariously perform masculinity simply by engaging with idol fandom.
可愛らしい子が頑張ってるなってとこから始まって、その一生懸命さがすごい好きになって、もしかしたらその自分が昔やれなかったことを、アイドルになりたいと思ってないですけど、いろんなことやりたいと思って挫折してきましたけど。
やってもらうための努力しないじゃない。
でもそれはいわゆるガチ恋とは違う。
それに近いと言いますか、はありますけど。
大学の同級生とか、
はい、自由にしてたいみたいな面があるんで、あんまりなんていうか束縛とかされるの嫌いなんで。
生物学的に一番美しいのは12歳頃ってよく言いません？から大人になるかならないかのちょうど狭間ぐらいが一番光って見えるような気はする。
The issue with creating a pure, idealized woman that lets men indulge in fake intimacy is that now the idol must always maintain the fantasy of their availability. Male fans believe that their idols are emotionally accessible and feel that they truly know their idol on a personal level. So much so that they can place their trust in them and spend more and more money on the person they admire. So naturally, pop idol stardom is tied to sexual oppression. Women who are outed for having a boyfriend typically experience severe backlash from their fans. And since idols are meant to represent role models for teenage girls, a hidden relationship is perceived not only as a bad expression of sexuality, but also a moral failing. Idols are expected to meticulously monitor their behavior to avoid shattering the illusion fans project onto them. Mima's public image is an untainted teenage-like girl, so it's no surprise the producer doesn't want to cast Mima in a serious role. The central conflict of Perfect Blue is Mima's struggle to create a new identity for herself when others have already perceived who she is and expect her to conform to it. And while Mima is desperate to break free from the suffocating pop idol image, the only path offered to her by the industry is to completely defile her previous reputation. Her male fans, who likely once perceived her as a pseudo-wife or daughter, are now forced to watch their innocent idol be brutalized on screen by random men. What's important to note is Mima's obvious discomfort when she agrees to do the scene. While Rumi argues that their job is to protect Mima, Tadokoro mentions how it'll cause too much trouble to change the script now. Later on, in the privacy of her room, Mima screams how she never wanted any of this, and that she just didn't want to disappoint the people who got her this far. Even though Mima made her own choice to become an actress, she still hasn't escaped the pressures of behaving according to what others expect of her. And now, she has to embody the image of a cooperative actress, even when it compromises her personal boundaries. As Hiroshi said best, female imagery is shown to be appropriated by the industry and retooled to suit the masculinist mode of production. The nightclub scene is graphic, to say the least. It lasts around 3 minutes. Mima is grabbed, forcefully undressed, and her screams grow louder as we witness different angles of her being assaulted. The camera pans to the light above her and the faces of leering men surrounding her. The light leaves Mima's eyes as she disassociates and imagines herself above a stage with fans cheering. Even though it's fictional, even though the actor apologizes between takes, Mima still has to snap in and out of character each time the director yells cut. The switching shots between her previous self and current situation symbolize how low she's fallen in pursuit of her dream. Even outside the set, her decision to take this role is framed as degrading. Cham finds out that Mima's participating in a photo shoot with a guy infamous for getting girls to strip, and Mima's former bandmate, who we'd assume would show some sympathy, instead gossips and insinuates Mima's a slutty person who's eager to sexualize herself to get ahead. Which doesn't make much sense. If the scene was meant to switch Mima's image from that of a childish idol to a serious actress, then why are her bandmates treating it as if she chose to act in an adult video? In the eyes of patriarchal society, where a woman's worth is tied to her purity, any expression of sexuality, even under exploitative conditions, will still tarnish her image. The rape scene, no matter how graphic, still paints Mima as an object of sexual desire, something to be gazed at, used, and discarded. And her desperation continues to be taken advantage of by the industry. The next scene cuts back and forth between Mima taking lewd photos and her bandmates singing a song about wishing to stay young and never enter adulthood. Now, at first glance, you might think this is a repeat of the same sequence we saw earlier, where we flip between Mima's easier past to her demeaning present. But Satoshi, a director known for his expert cinematography, wouldn't have two sequences convey the exact same message. And the difference lies in one character, Mimania, Mima's stalker and ex-fanatic. While Mima has second thoughts and locks herself in the bathroom, Mimania attends Cham's latest concert, and he imagines the old Mima performing on stage. The film cuts between both the fake Mima and the real Mima, as well as the two men who are looking at her from a lens that abstracts reality. The photographer is peering through a camera as he pressures Mima to take off her clothes, and Mimania is lovingly watching a Mima that doesn't exist anymore. Both Mimas are an abstraction. Both are based on a false perception. The whorish Mima who should be comfortable stripping since she's sexualized herself before, and the virginal Mima who never left the pop industry and remains angelic forever. No matter what, the male gaze is the ruling factor. And either way, Mima is dehumanized. She remains an object designed to be perceived as whichever archetype the male audience wants to see her as. So Satoshi isn't saying that Mima was better off as a pop idol. Within any context of appealing to the male gaze, the potential of objectification is always present. When you're treated simply as a body valued for consumption, you're no longer an actual person deserving respect. To say that women wield power under patriarchy because they can successfully reap benefits from male validation is to ignore how their bodies remain suspended in a vulnerable position, where appeal and harassment exist in direct proximity. Mimania's obsession hinges on Mima's pure image, an ideal so deeply ingrained in his mind that he can't possibly accept her decision to become an actress. His devotion was never to Mima as a person, but to the concept of her, an illusion he thought belonged to him and that he now feels was unfairly taken from him. Even when Mima isn't actively performing for the male gaze, she's watched and perceived non-consensually. Mimania creates a blog website called Mima's Room, dedicated to documenting her daily life. It's revealed that he was already stalking and photographing Mima before she announced her retirement, meaning that he never respected her boundaries in the first place. The danger of commodification is that you rarely have any control over what others will expect of you, and especially how they'll react once you stop complying. Since Mimania consumed a version of Mima that existed only to gratify his fantasy, when that illusion was ruined, he resorted to violence. Mimania's first instinct when he gets Mima all alone isn't to murder her, but to sexually assault her. It was never about getting rid of the imposter, but punishing a woman who went against what he wanted. Mimania's fickle relationship to Mima reflects how the safety women can earn under patriarchy is always conditional. Victim-blaming culture ensures that there's no way for a woman to be seen as completely innocent. If she's initially willing and then declines, she's perceived as a tease who actually wanted it. If she's sexualized herself before, that means she's an easy lay. More often than not, we blame women for provoking their own rape. Mimania's attempted assault occurs on the same stage where Mima acted out the nightclub scene, which, if you noticed earlier, had her wearing an outfit that was similar to the pop idol uniform. No matter how ashamed or disgusted Mimania might have felt watching his beloved Mima corrupt herself, it still wasn't enough to guarantee Mima's safety against sexual violence. The gaze that infantilizes is just as ingenuine as the gaze that sexualizes. Through these parallel scenes, Satoshi reveals how women's bodies remain sites of control. The fake assault mirrors the real assault because in both cases, Mima's true feelings or consent are irrelevant. What matters is how she satisfies male expectations or is punished for defying them. Yet, it isn't just the world that punishes Mima, but her very own psyche. There are some psychological experiences that are uniquely female. One aspect of the male gaze that's rarely discussed is how women themselves are also watching how they're depicted in media. While there are clear differences between Western and Eastern ideals, the existence of a dominant gaze, one that defines the image of womanhood presented to young girls, will still inevitably shape how they come to understand their own identities as they grow up. Objectification theory was developed by Barbara Fredrickson and Tommy Ann Roberts in 1997. They first explain how female objectification has cemented itself in popular culture. Girls see their own bodies objectified in movies, shows, ads, music videos, magazines, and more. Society teaches women that being attractive to the male gaze is the right way to present themselves. From a young age, entertainment pushes the idea that romance is the ultimate goal for women, so girls spend their teen years and even adulthood chasing the so-called ideal body and personality that men like. And as girls become more aware of this, they adopt a habit of constantly monitoring themselves. They need to make sure they measure up to current standards of femininity, or else they risk being excluded from normal society. You can't construct your own identity without objectifying yourself if you belong to a society that values you based on your outward appearance. Although lookism does affect both men and women, there's an implicit difference in how we measure our own worth since we're conditioned into internalizing very different gender roles. I think John Berger, an art critic who wrote about how women were sexualized as far back as the 16th century, puts it best. She has to survey everything she is and everything she does because how she appears to men is of crucial importance for what is normally thought of as the success of her life. One might simplify this by saying men act and women appear. Men look at women, women watch themselves being looked at. This determines not only most relations between men and women, but also the relation of women to themselves. The surveyor of woman in herself is male, the surveyed female. Thus, she turns herself into an object, and most particularly an object of vision, is sight. In other words, women are socialized to have a false consciousness. You're always at risk of being monitored, scrutinized, and judged against societal standards. Women in the industry take this a step further by practically signing away their autonomy once they enter the public eye. Previously, Mima could separate her identity into two selves, the Mima on stage and the Mima at home. But now, the distinction between who she really is and who her fans perceive her as is nearly impossible to define. She hallucinates a second self, one that watches as Mima is placed in increasingly demeaning situations and constantly asks whether she truly wants to remain an actress or if she wants to return to being an idol. This version of Mima's psyche calls her filthy, tarnished, and worthless, trying to convince the real living Mima that she must revert to the version of herself that was loved by fans. Yet, as we've already established, even Mima's pop idol life was never aligned to her true self. What Mima the hallucination represents is the observer's perspective humanized. She is the man watching Mima's actions in her own mind. There is no escape, and there is no winning under patriarchal surveillance. One of the earliest sequences in the film switches between Mima performing on stage to her unknowingly performing as she buys groceries. When she discovers Mimania's blog, she initially dismisses it as a joke, but as she reads posts detailing her usual routines with eerie accuracy, Mima starts becoming hyper-aware of her own actions. Under this constant sense of surveillance, she hesitates to do things that she had normally done before, like getting off the train with her left foot. Mima can't find an identity that is independent to herself after the male gaze has seeped into her own consciousness. And the third act of the film demonstrates just how damaging this is for women. It's also hard to describe. We keep shifting between what appears to be Mima's real life and the character she plays on set, who also happens to be a woman that's losing her grip on reality. Scenes of Mima visiting Cham, talking with Rumi about her mental state, and filming as her character all blur together, relying on the same cinematic tricks Satoshi has been using throughout the film. Traditionally, match cuts are used to seamlessly transition from one scene to the next without jarring the viewer. But Satoshi subverts this technique in order to make us assume we know what's going on before flipping our perception on its head. By the time we figure out which version of Mima we're watching, the one who hides her feelings to stay agreeable, the actress playing her role, or the real Mima who's going insane, we're already pulled into the next scene with a different Mima. It's extremely disorienting, and that's the point. Our assumptions about what we think we understand is challenged, our perception of who Mima is becomes distorted, and at the same time, Mima loses the ability to perceive herself. At this point in the film, Mima has the same disassociative look in her eyes as she did at the nightclub scene. She stares at a picture of herself in Mima's room and says,
"I guess I went to Harajuku today."
She symbolically begins to trust Mimania's telling of events and his construction of her identity. Meanwhile, filming for the drama series wraps up with a final change to the script. The character Mima is playing, who originally was a girl named Yoko, is rewritten to be a pop star turned actress named Mima.
Okay, and what do you do?
I don't know. Now I'm an actress.
That must be really hard work.
Yeah, it's really hard, but it's what I've chosen to do.
The line is the same line Mima uses to reassure Rumi back during one of her visits. At this point, Mima's sanity has fallen to its lowest point. What makes it even more unsettling is that the role she gave up everything to play ends up reflecting her own struggles. It feels disturbingly fitting. The boundary between her life and her performance is completely broken. But where does that leave us? What does it say about both the fictional audience and us, the real audience, who watch Mima successfully transform from a washed-up pop idol to a celebrated actress? What does it say about the industry that even after Mima plays a gritty, mentally ill character, the next acting job is one that Tadokoro describes as having a few sketchy scenes? What does it say that this method clearly works because Mima eventually becomes famous enough that fans are skeptical they're meeting the real her? The final scene has Mima remove her sunglasses and say,
No, I'm the real thing.
Did you notice that she isn't directly looking at herself in the mirror? She's looking at us, through the mirror. The viewer who Satoshi places in this uncomfortable peeping Tom position multiple times throughout the film. I think the reason the apartment scene stuck out to me was because it almost felt like Mima was guilting me for doing something wrong. A private place that belonged to her was infiltrated by a male fanatic, and she stares at me, as though I was the one who violated her personal boundaries. But is there really a difference between the person who inflicts pain and the one entertained by watching it happen? I will say that social media has probably made false perceptions even worse. You can't really know a person behind a public persona. I mean, even right now, you can only perceive me based on the information I allow you to know. You have no control over what I reveal, and I have no control over what you perceive. I could tell you that the movie also freaked me out because I've had 2 stalkers, but at the end of the day, I am a random woman on the internet, and we are separated by a single screen. Anchors up, Catharsis out.